look at the patient, make a prescription, and the doctor will pause and look at a little thermal imbalance in some part of the face, and the diagnosis can be completely different from that point onwards. So the difference is the second doctor was looking at the face of the patient as a painting. So Yale is doing that. If Yale is doing that, there's no reason why Nirma cannot use theater as a form of management education. So that's the kind of thing which forms in the mind when we wander. So our challenge in life is to not get to reductive thinking. Reductive thinking is very important, but it is not a source of innovation. The second thing that's very important to understand is that innovation happens when we include other people into our lives. We're not thinking about ourselves, but we're thinking of other people. Now, how do we include other people in our lives? Look at this XY diagram here. As businessmen, as entrepreneurs, as professional managers, our job is essentially to create value over time. Right? That's what we do. You know, how much value have you created over what period of time for your stakeholders? Now, if you want to create value over time, and you see the lower left corner, that's the value you're creating for your customers and your suppliers. And when you create value for them, you don't have to do really enormous innovation. All you have to do is to keep doing the same good stuff with incrementalism built into it. So my favorite example is, let's say I'm a householder and I buy surf detergent, and all surf has to do is to periodically come and tell me sometimes that, okay, ye nimbu wala jhaag hai isme. So I'm very happy, nimbu wala jhaag hai. What it is, God alone knows. You know, a detergent is a detergent. Then after 6 months, you know, Unilever will come and say 25% extra for the same price. Okay. Ab rip open pouch mein, whatever. So these are not things which go into molecular level transformation or completely taking a whole new approach to washing. So incrementalism generally keeps your customer happy. But if you ever want to deal with your customer's customer or your supplier's supplier, then incrementalism will not work. Then you will have to innovate. Then you will come out with something fundamentally different. Because you don't know them, you don't speak the language. You have to be creative. So if you've seen in recent times, there's a lot of advertisements coming up where capital goods manufacturers are actually talking to the child in the family. And rightly so, because the decision to buy a certain make of a car in a typical household is not taken by the mother or the father, it's taken by the child. If the child does not want Ford Fugo, you can't get Ford Fugo inside the house. Simple as that. And certainly you can't, you know, the one who's deciding the color is probably the kid who's going to kindergarten. And, you know, she will say, Daddy, you know, we must have a yellow car, and Daddy will make sure, Mommy will make sure it's a yellow car. There's an ad that a colleague showed me the other day of Android phone that is making its ripples on YouTube, and the phone ad is actually targeted to a whole series of conversations where the engagement with the adult is happening via the child. Okay. So the customer, apparent customer, is the adult, but the customer's customer is the child. So we start innovating when we start thinking about the customer's customer and say, so what is the stated need, or sometimes the unstated need of the customer's customer? If you can talk to your customer's customer and establish that linkage, your customer will eat out of your hand. If you are not engaged with the customer's customer, then you will fall prey to the tyranny of your customer. The customer will actually, take you for a ride, will demand impossible things sometimes, and you will become pretty soon irrelevant. The same thing happens with suppliers. If you are engaged with your supplier, you know each other's language, but you start thinking about your supplier, you suddenly are out of depth. You don't know their language, you don't know their issues. And when you don't know something, you're back to this state of innocence. In that childlike innocence picture I showed you, you're back in that state. Then you're keeping your mind open. And then you're curious. Then you ask questions. So innovation happens, or is most likely to happen, if we are engaging with our customer's customer or the supplier's supplier. Am I making sense to you? Good. Tell me when you feel sleepy. The third thing that is important to understand is innovation happens when we think in an existential manner. It sounds like a very complex word. Just be with me for a moment and I'll explain to you what this is all about. So all of you are knowledge workers, right? Right? You are knowledge workers? You will consume knowledge for the rest of your life and you will produce knowledge. That's all that you will do. So you will have an input quantum of knowledge and you will do something. You will convert that knowledge to something useful and somebody will pay a price for that. So the question that comes to our mind is, how do we relate to knowledge? Is knowledge something to which all of us relate the same way? Okay. Now I show you this this device here, and I'll ask you. So what do you think of this? Chances are there'll be 50 different ways of looking at this device from this audience. So that's what I mean by relating to knowledge. Okay. If there's a plastics engineer here, will relate to this as a material. Okay. There's an electronics guy sitting there, will relate to it in a very different way. If there's a ergonomic designer there, will relate differently. There's an end user who feels frustrated about having to hold such a device, will relate to it very differently. So we relate to knowledge or bodies of knowledge very differently. So if we relate to knowledge remaining the same, that is this device, if we relate to the same body of knowledge differently, then we create different sets of value. Right? So there's a man called Yves Doss, who is one of the leading thinkers in the world of knowledge management, and he built this very simple model. And he said that we relate to any body of knowledge at 3 different levels. At the lowest level is the technical layer. How many of you are engineers here? Wow, congratulations. So most of you, most of the time, you're conditioned to look at things at this layer. Okay. Technical layer is, there's nothing wrong in this layer. But you understand that at this layer, anything that you are shown, you are likely to look at that body of knowledge in terms of specifications. In terms of specifications. This is the engineering layer. So I'll show you this, then your mind will immediately race towards specifications. This is the layer at which you expect me to tell you what to do, and you will do it according to specification. This is also called the adaptive layer, okay, which means that this is the layer at which reverse engineering happens. I will tell you that, can you make this with a smaller footprint, a lower emission, okay, longer life, lower cost. So you will open it up, look at all the devices, sub-devices inside. Okay, you look at the existing drawings, and then you'll come out with an object which is 30% faster, 40% cheaper, all that stuff. So this is the layer at which we basically do reverse engineering. This is the layer at which least innovation happens. Because I'm telling you to do something, and then you are doing it. Yeah? Make sense? At the next layer is what Yves Doss calls the experiential layer. And at this layer, you are not dealing with specifications. Nobody is saying, this is the height, weight, cost, this is the electrical emission, electrical consumption and magnetic emission, none of that stuff. At this layer, you don't depend on specifications. You engage with one simple thing, and that is, what does it take to step into the shoe of the customer? It's not about design, it's not about engineering. It is all about how do I step into the shoe of the customer. And to illustrate this point, Doss talks about a particular narrative in which Nissan wanted to introduce a car for the European market. Now, Nissan did not bring four brochures, download 6 specifications, and do a mix and match, and then say, here's a car for the European market. The fender of this, the tail light of that, the exhaust of something else, the bonnet of yet another model. They didn't do that. What they did is they sent 200 engineers to Frankfurt airport. They got down. They rented different makes of rental cars from the airport, and they went off to drive 2,500 kilometers each in different directions as teams to just get a sense of what does it feel to be a motorist in Europe. Now, those of you who know Europe know that it's not one country. It's not one terrain. So the motoring experience that you get by driving on the Autobahn is very different from the motoring experience you'll get while you're driving up the French Alps. Driving up the French Alps or negotiating the bend on your way back in winter is different from spring, is different from summer, is different from morning, is different from night, is different from rain, different in snow. And each of those have engineering implications, right? The torque you require to move out of a snowbound road, and the braking you require at night while there's a thin drizzle, right? The kind of remote capability that you require, the heating capability you require, all those things will change. So what these engineers did is that they drove 2,500 kilometers in different terrain, came back, put their body of knowledge together, and that's how they built a car designed for Europe. So here, they're dealing not with specifications, but they're dealing with the idea of knowledge, which is about stepping into the shoe of the customer. Okay? Stepping into the shoe of the customer. But the highest level is the existential level. At this level, you don't step into the shoe of the customer. You creep into the mind of the customer, not shoe of the customer. Now, I'll give you 2 examples of this. One example I'll give you is the example of Aadhaar. How many of you have the Aadhaar card? Excellent. The Aadhaar card is driven by a software which was built by Mindtree. Mindtree created the platform on which the Aadhaar card works, or is issued, is verified. So each time your authenticity will be proved, the engine behind that was built by Mindtree. The thought process behind Aadhaar was best exemplified when the chief architect from the UID's team was speaking to us. And he cited this example of a woman from a remote village in Karnataka who wanted to get a land document straightened in her name. You know what the state of land documents are in this country. So imagine that you are a probably barely literate woman somewhere deep inside Karnataka, and you want a land record to be sorted out. So you have to step outside of your village. It's a traumatic experience for anyone, particularly if you're a woman, to step outside of your village. And she comes to her taluk. At the taluk level, they said, we can't help you. You have to go to the subdivisional level. At that level, they said, no, it can't be done here, you have to go to the district level. And what happens at each level? Wherever she goes, first of all, she is shocked because unfamiliar people, unfamiliar language. Okay. She's going to government offices. Even you will get nervous if you go to a government office. And what is the starting point of conversation at each of those places? The starting point of conversation is, who are you? Who are you? The lady said that how come in my village everybody knows me, and how come outside of my village nobody knows me? You do not face this problem because you were given a birth certificate. You don't face that problem because your parents ensured that you got a driver's license. You don't face that problem because 99% of all of you have a passport. So nobody can say, who are you? For most Indians, even today, they cannot prove who